Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with these guys.
Hey, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Dave.
And today we have another edition of D&D Do's and Don'ts, and we're going to talk about punishing inexperienced players.
You can jump down to the description below where you can find Nerdarchy the newsletter, gain weekly tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So, punishing inexperienced players for lack of mechanical knowledge is an absolutely don't. You want to actually, as your do, you want to teach them. We were talking off camera, Ryan, you brought up pairing them with an experienced player or someone that specifically knows how to play that particular class.
So, really what got me thinking onto this idea, this topic, was I've been, binging through while I'm at work, watching the West Marches, the campaign from Steve Lumpkin on It Me JP's Roleplay. And so it's a lot of the people that are on there are a lot of Twitch streamers who primarily in the video game space, but a lot of them still they either played D&D back in the day, like 3rd edition, 2nd edition, or they've just always been interested in it because there's a lot of overlap between video gamers and tabletoppers. But there's quite a few of them that their knowledge of the system, they've not really taken the time to learn the book material, the source material, and know what the sort of the capacities of their characters are. And there's been TPKs because of the fact people didn't know how to play their character. And I do feel that sometimes Steve Lumpkin has a tendency to punish people's ineptitude for playing the character. So the character wants to fucking live in the fiction of the world, so they're gonna do everything they can and use all their resources and abilities, but the player doesn't really know
what those abilities are,
what those things are, and the best times to use them.
So this is one of those instances where I would say that gaming online is a huge disadvantage than gaming at a table with people because we've always traditionally, even when we didn't know we were doing it, instinctively have done this thing where we use mentorship in our games, where we take an inexperienced player and sit them next to an experienced player.
Well, I mean, everybody usually, but for that one inexperienced player, everybody else is fairly experienced around the table around them anyway.
True.
So,
well, that's true, but generally one person will be designated to help them.
Yeah.
Whether the GM asks or that person just kind of volunteers. But when you're streaming online, obviously that's a lot harder because
you're not sitting right next to the player. You can't see their character sheet. You can't be like, oh, well, by the way, you've got this thing here that you haven't used yet. It's a really powerful ability. I recommend, getting that into the mix.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also too, most of the people that are in this virtual tabletop space, the majority of them are new D&D players. So,
right.
Other than the person running the game, not a lot of them, know the 5th edition rule set super well. Right. So, it just, there is some moments where, I'm like, damn, Steve, you're kind of, it's always a GM named Steve. But, they got a bit, move. They kind of do, killer GM sort of stuff.
Right.
And I feel like he is a little bloodthirsty, just a little bit. Whereas, if I were GMing, if they wanted to, take backseas on stuff because they could have or should have done this thing, there's things they could have done last round that was a bonus action to activate that they clearly had a bonus action. Player didn't really think about it because they don't know the rule set.
Right.
So
or something you can do as well, if you have a bunch of players that are new to the game, you almost want to set up these tutorial style adventures.
It's like the video games where it's when you're in town and they're you can do this thing.
Yeah.
Here you're doing this thing.
Yeah, essentially, you want to do that in a more organic way.
A lot of video games have it, but yeah.
Oh, I just see sitting around the table and you hold up a little dialogue window. Now would be a good time to check on such and such.
Oh, that would be hilarious. I would love to see the tabletop role-playing game that is run like the RPG, the video game RPG with dialogue boxes and stuff like that. That would be pretty damn funny.
I don't know if I want to play in it, but yeah, it might be funny to watch.
A short, it'd be a funny sketch to watch, but also too, a short arc where it kind of feels like that. There's been comic books that kind of take the idea of you're an NPC in a world type of situation.
Right.
But yeah, it could be interesting.
So, okay, so you bring up the good point of not having enough experienced players to mentor. So I guess at the tabletop it does not always work.
Yeah.
So what are some things the DM can do? Like you said, they can do the takes backsies, which is like some DMs just don't like doing that. Like Scott can be killer DM-ish like that, where he doesn't like that, and he doesn't like to do it as a player either.
Right.
So there is that.
Once he says I'm doing X, it doesn't matter what clarifications you throw on there. It doesn't matter how intelligent the character is. The player has said he's
got
doing
his
it.
foot on the accelerator, riding that burning bus off the goddamn cliff.
It's going.
So what if you didn't have a chance to narrate that the road ends and it's a cliff? He's going. He's going there.
So again, this speaks to a problem that comes up, and player knowledge versus character knowledge, and where in an instance where the character knowledge is vastly superior to the actual player knowledge. The only problem is the player's controlling that character.
They're like, why would you let this asshole drive?
yeah.
He doesn't have a license and he's drunk. Like, what is going on? Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, like don't be a killer GM. Occasionally allow things to be,
especially if they clearly
back.
would have or should have thought to do a thing.
And perfect example, as you brought up with Scott. There was one time he said, well, I'm going to cast this spell. Well, I happen to know, because I did work with ritual spells in my other character, that the spell he wanted to cast was a ritual only. Yeah. So it was going to be like 10 rounds or 20 rounds for him to cast it.
Did it work, though, somehow, by some weird thing, like combination?
Well, no, well, for the first time that he did it, I told him, like, look, you don't want to cast that spell right now. Your character
knows that, like, it'd be like you could have had a sandwich in the time that you did that ritual.
Right. So it was something where he was actually frustrated as a player that I corrected.
Took away his agency of spending 10 minutes.
If that's what you want to do, I don't have a problem with it.
But it's dumb. Like, your character's way smarter than to do that shit right now.
But that's what he wanted. And later on he did wind up using that spell effectively against something that didn't move, or you guys kept it.
Somebody else put it under a spell that pinned it in place or something.
So, it eventually came up that it was like, yeah, he got to use the spell the way he wanted it, but it was like,
it's like a rare circumstance,
right? So. The situation I'm trying to get to is, as the GM, if you acknowledge that an inexperienced player is doing something that the character would know not to do, you can correct them. You can say that might not be your best course of action. Jumping into the lava is not going to have the desired effect on survival that you think it might.
Yeah. Are you sure? It seems so warm and toasty, like a hot bath.
But I'm cold.
Yeah, so there is a lot of that. And granted, like the example Brian brought up with that game, is that game's for entertainment, so it's not.
Well, and that's another thing that makes me think about it too, is like, they don't want to spend the time or whatever, because the game is meant to also to be entertaining to a viewership, and constantly explaining to people that you might not want to do this, or you're forgetting about this ability that you have access to.
It's also
it's just easier to murder them.
It's just easier to kill them and call it a day, because that's entertaining.
It's the medium as well, whereas that one is designed to entertain not the people at the table as much as to entertain the watchers, whereas most D&D
because the players are bored as shit. I'm just kidding. Everybody seems like they're having a really good time.
No, I'm not trying to say that the players aren't having fun. What I'm saying is the design of that is more to entertain
the
masses,
of the purpose,
whereas the typical D&D group is meant to entertain those
to maximize the fun of the people at the table.
Yes,
for sure.
Ultimately the point is, don't punish new players for lacking mechanic knowledge of the game. And we see this in the comments all the time, where people kind of get angry. Well, why haven't you read those books all the way through? That 400 and memorized it. And if you're like me, it really doesn't matter how many times you read it. You're not going to memorize everything by just reading it over and over again.
Yeah, and also too, like, so for us that have been playing for 10 plus years, like, all these games and systems have like a consistent logic, like like 3rd, 4th, 5th edition, like there's still elements of those things that are always going to be the same. And if you're new coming to the hobby, where like this stuff doesn't make sense because it's not ingrained to you, whereas like you get a sense of like the rules flow and design of role-playing games because you've been playing a shitload of role-playing games.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And when I play a new game, I'm always like, look, don't spend all this time telling me the rules. I'll tell you what I'm going to try and do.
You tell me how that
me how
works.
to
Tell me how it works. What do I roll?
Yeah.
Which die? Which funny shaped die?
Yeah.
So with that, what do you guys do when you have inexperienced players at your table? How do you help them? Do you just punish the shit out of them? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can head over to nerdhockey.com and get some sweet swag.
You can find us over on Snapchat.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.